Hi, this is Alice from the Main Quest. You can find the content of this video as a regular article on themainquest.com along with all my other reviews, news, analyses, and developer interviews. Let's get right into it. Star Equestrian is a mobile horse MMO recently released by Foxy Ventures. The game is now available for iOS and Android. If you haven't heard anything about it yet, I highly recommend checking out my preview article or the corresponding video. I'll link that in the description. Foxy Ventures founder and director Dineth Abenayaki and product manager Stephen Reddy took some time before the release to show me a preview of what their newest game would offer and to answer a few questions about Star Equestrian's development and its future, from Meadowcroft to Evervale. Thanks to a handful of conversations over the years, Steve first reached out to me not long after my Horse Riding Tales review, I was aware that Foxy Ventures was working on another horse game. Horse Riding Tales itself has gone through numerous updates since I had a closer look at it. A recent update even added a breeding feature, albeit one that is currently limited to the Frisian horses. But Star Equestrian was meant to be an entirely different beast, and something that could not fit into a simple edition for Horse Riding Tales. Horse Riding Tales has been around for a few years, Steve begins. We now know more about horse games and what their fans are looking for, and we now know more about the technical architecture required to build a game like this. It made more sense to start from scratch and build this from the ground up, so we could make the game we actually wanted to make. Star Equestrian is an actually massive multiplayer game, where HRT was a lot more constrained, he explains. With our plans to expand into new areas over the coming months, the scope is really next level. You can play Star Equestrian as an adventure game, helping the people of Heartside and playing through the story, or you can play it as an eventing game and focus on the championship. But I also believe that a number of players are just going to really enjoy going for trail rides that they organize socially among themselves. The release of Star Equestrian does not necessarily mean that the further development of Horse Riding Tales will slow down. The two games have already been developed in parallel for the past couple of years, Steve explains, and we plan to continue this post-release. After the recent breeding update for Horse Riding Tales, we also have plans to expand how you can interact with the world and a Sky Islands area on the roadmap. The Foxy team is not overly worried about losing the HRT player base to their newer project. Of course, there's going to be a whole stack of people who play both, Steve explains. But we also view Horse Riding Tales fans as a slightly different market to Star Equestrian. There were things we wanted to do with Horse Riding Tales that were not well received by the fanbase. And on the other hand, we know that there's a whole genre of people who are really passionate about horses but who don't like Horse Riding Tales. As we saw more and more views of what people wanted, and considering the foundation we had from other games we built in the meantime, we figured we could take all that and build a horse game that these horse lovers could really get behind and be passionate about. Inspirations and advice. To gather and analyze those learnings of what horse game players want, Foxy's market research wasn't limited to mobile games. We looked at what the indie game crews are doing in their games, and also where they're not quite hitting the mark in certain things. And yes, we looked at Red Dead Redemption and why it's such a popular horse game when it's not a horse game. We've read all these articles on this really good blog we found, Steve continues in mock fascination, keeping a mostly straight face until I start cracking up, which had these really good critiques about horse games and what they should and should not do, so that was a really good resource. I'm glad to hear it, I laugh, and ask if there's any concrete advice they took and applied from reading the main quest. The specificness of the horse animation is something we took extra care with based on what we learned on the main quest, Steve goes on to explain. We've gone to people like yourself and others to ask for feedback and put the animations through several iterations to ensure it's a realistic and genuine experience. He adds that my article on horse game mechanics is one reason behind why Star Equestrian never forces the player to engage in brushing or hoof-picking mechanics. You can feed your horse via the menu, Steve tells me, or you can actually carry your food and feed it to the horse in the game itself for roleplay purposes. Beyond that, you will not be grinding away at repetitive horse care tasks. Instead, the feeding mechanics are part of the system to level up your horse, thereby offering an optional reward instead of imposing themselves as an obligatory task. We've also addressed multiple points from your 8 Common Horse Mistakes article, says Steve, citing their careful animation work, controls for individual gaits, free camera mode, and lack of repetitive horse care as evidence. Taking off your saddle for horses in your ranch is on our wish list for when we get the time. But you can already carry your saddle around, which is fun, he adds. I really do use the main quest as my go-to authority for horse game mechanics and game systems. On the topic of horse story tropes, Steve adds that he found one of the many every horse story parody posts on our community Discord. I passed it around the office and we all laughed. With the Star Equestrian story, we tried hard to find the balance between not fitting into that stereotypical story mold while still making it very horse-centric. It's a horse game for horse lovers, so the story needs to be focused on horses and the people that love them. Hence the overarching storyline about trying to find Snowdrop again. Ads, titles, testing. Star Equestrian was officially announced on Foxy Ventures' social media sites in November 2022. Before that, the game managed to raise a handful of eyebrows in the horse game communities on Facebook. Users reported seeing ads for a new horse game, which didn't actually exist yet. Different players reported seeing the same game images, but claiming that the game had a different title. Before long, users were warning each other not to engage with these ads, suspecting a scam. What looked shady to community members is actually an incredibly common tactic in mobile game marketing, however. While pretend announcing a game under different titles and seeing which gets the most click is practically unheard of in PC and console games, the mobile games market is incredibly data-driven and relies on such methods more often than not. Foxy's founder Dineth is aware of the irritation their tests cause, but considers the findings and results more valuable than the harm done by the initial confusion. I think it was worth it, yes, Dineth confirms when I ask about this. For every confused Facebook post, there are thousands of actual data points that help us decide on our marketing messaging. So, while a dozen people in the community may agree that they dislike this tactic and are less inclined to trust the game for it, they are a vocal minority. A few thousand users still silently provides the valuable insight into which game ads or titles get clicked and which get ignored. If we were to do anything differently, Dineth adds, we might have announced the game before running our tests so anyone confused could easily check the authenticity of the game. I was actually surprised to see those posts of people's irritation, he concedes. We didn't really expect people to communicate and be so confused about this. The timing of us officially announcing the game actually had a lot to do with alleviating that confusion as quickly as we could. That admission confirms a thought that I had had ever since initially seeing people talk about those marketing tests. Mobile game developers are not really used to their players talking to each other. While mobile games with dedicated communities certainly exist, app gamers don't usually gather in general gaming spaces to discuss what they're playing. The horses and video games communities that I've built up over the years are united by thematic content, however, and not limited to a specific platform, giving these discussions more room to grow. In the case of Star Equestrian, the game's title itself was subjective to extensive A/B testing preceding the game's announcement. So what, did you just go and combine Star Stable with Equestrian the game? I prompt, only half joking. Steve laughs and hands the question over to Foxy's founder. The title choice was largely based on testing, Dineth explains. The winning test isn't necessarily going to be the final title, but it's definitely an inspiration for the direction we can go in. Star Equestrian beat all the other variants we tried by a large margin, so we knew that had potential. And it does fit the game and the Star Championship setting. I add that Star Stable is hardly the first or only popular horse game to use that particular celestial connotation either, considering the past and present successes of games like Mary King's Riding Star and Rival Stars Horse Racing. Everything's all about listings and rankings in the App Store. That's massive, adds Steve on the topic of title choice. There is a danger of using a title with more generic keywords, but it's outweighed by the benefits of ranking for keywords people actually search for. I think you said this in one of your articles. You could name your game something really unique and then you'd easily be found on Google, but if it's not a horse term, no one is ever going to type that in. It's a balance, really. While marketing and keyword testing are a standard part of the process, Star Equestrian is the first of Foxy's titles that got beta tested by players before release. It's absolutely been a good experience and worth it, Steve says. There have been a few suggestions and requests where players said they'd like to be able to do something and we could respond by saying, you could actually do this by doing that. So obviously our tutorialization wasn't quite clear enough here or there, and that's all part of what player testing is for. Balancing and mechanics. We discussed a few more features that, at the time of our call, I only had a superficial impression of, that bonding with your horse unlocks a few additional interactions, that you level up your horse by feeding, that you can access everything in the game without any paywall whatsoever. Now that the game is out, you can try all of those things by yourself. One additional tidbit that I found interesting, and which may not be immediately obvious from simply trying the game yourself, is how your horse's stats will affect its handling. Leveling up your horse is going to affect your actual controls, Steve tells me. And as you level up, some challenges become noticeably easier, so you'll really feel the difference in riding around that track. That your horse gets better to control, faster acceleration, higher top speed, tighter turns, feeling more responsive overall, is something that many horse games do, but it's also a very delicate balance. If you're able to improve your horse's handling, that means you start out with the worst that the game has to offer. This can be in significant conflict with the general interest of game creators to provide a satisfying first-time experience to new players. Those first 5, 10, 15 minutes of play is what many people will judge your game by, and if they have a negative first impression of the controls and overall experience, they may not ever come back. I tell Steve about my initial experiences with Star Stable Online and how I initially turned away from the game pretty quickly, being dissatisfied with the horse handling. until I realized how much better that handling would get over time, thanks to trying a friend's leveled up account and horse. It's an interesting problem, Steve agrees, and one we've debated a lot. Snowdrop is actually much easier to control than your starter horse. You then get a few intro riding missions that let you try your starter horse for comparison. We added those missions after the initial beta testing. The method of giving the player an overpowered thing or ability or horse in this case early on and then taking it away again is tried and true. The player gets an early taste for what is possible later in the game while still getting to play the whole process of leveling up and gaining additional skills or powers. This is sometimes referred to as an abilities. Snowdrop is the first example of it I've seen in a horse game, however. The future of Star Equestrian. Foxy Ventures runs several mobile live service games. Dino Tamers, Wolf Tales, and Virtual Sim Story being their non-horsey projects. Over 20 people are currently working on Star Equestrian specifically, though the team size has shifted quite a lot through the development process. Star Equestrian was released worldwide for iOS devices on March 13, 2023, with Android following on March 28. The reception I've seen in my communities in the time since the game has gone live is generally positive, though I've also seen some frustration from players at the loot box system and the fact that you can only gamble for horses, never buy a specific one. Foxy tells me they are currently looking at options for selling specific horses to cater to players more likely to engage this way. Several players have already played through the currently available story content and are now waiting for more. I myself have actually ended up playing a little bit every day since release, despite the initially hesitant conclusion of my review. I'm at 91% completion in the main story, with a handful of side quests left to do. I asked the team how complete the game is in its current state. It really depends on how it's received and how it performs, Tineth tells me. We've had a generally very positive reaction so far, and we are already working on the next batch of content. I see so much room for improvement in all aspects of the game, especially with the horses and making them feel unique and alive rather than just vehicles you control. Graphics, world narrative, and how you interact with other players can all be developed further as well. Having said that, adds Steve, we also hope that what we've released now is seen as a complete experience. The quests, missions, and events at release add up to about 20 to 25 hours of gameplay. But we're going to build on what we have, and anyone who joins Star Equestrian in 3 years' time will play a significantly bigger version of it. Playing Star Equestrian and talking to Foxy has proven to me that the team have done their homework. They know their market and the competition, and they have an awareness of what the adult horse fan audience is looking for that I've not often seen in our niche, especially from professional and established studios. I'm also particularly thrilled that my work on the main quest has helped bridge that gap, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how the game develops further from here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope the video format worked for this article. It's a bit different because it's not just me talking, but me quoting other people talking. So let me know if that was understandable or if you have suggestions for how to make that clearer in the future. This is still experimental. I'm not sure I'll do this for future articles, but I wanted to give it another try, especially for an article that is more like text heavy and less dependent on video footage. So yeah, let me know what you thought. I really appreciate your comments, your thumbs up, and your subscriptions to the channel if you want to see more of this. We'll see how it goes. I'll just keep doing this as long as I feel like it. Remember to check out my other content on themainquest.com and follow me on social media for your regular horse game news and updates. See you next time. Thank you so much.